This is a structure, the structure of the heart. Now, if you look at the heart, we have this diagram here. We have an arrow. Now, some arrow is pointing inward, some are pointing outward. Now, that arrow signifies the flow of blood. The arrow signifies the flow of blood into and out of the heart. Okay. Now, if you look at remember arteries. Arteries takes blood away from the heart. Now, use the first letter of an artery. The first letter is A, which stands for away. So, artery takes blood away from the heart, while veins brings blood into the heart. So, anytime you see an arrow pointing inwards into the heart, that means that that actually is a vein. But once you see an arrow pointing outward, look at this place, look at this aorta, you can see the arrow pointing outward. So that shows you that this is an artery. So aorta is an artery. Now look at the pulmonary vein. Now you can see arrow pointing inward. That shows you that this is a vein. So take note of that. Same thing, look at this superior vena cava. Vena cava shows the arrow pointing inward, shows you that this vena cava is actually a vein. Okay, so we'll talk about that later on. All right, so moving on. Now, blood coming from the lungs. You know, blood coming from the lungs, they are rich in oxygen. So we use the word oxygenated. Now, remember the acronym I gave you? LOD, left oxygenated. So everything on the left is blood carrying oxygen. Everything on the right is blood carrying carbon dioxide, which we use the word deoxygenated. Now, for the oxygenated, it goes into the pulmonary vein. Now you can see another pulmonary vein here. It's just at the back. It's just extended from the back. So that's the pulmonary vein. This is another pulmonary vein. You can see the arrow pointing inward. So blood coming from the lungs goes into the heart to the left atrium. Now remember, I told you that atrium receives blood. Atrium, the same thing we referred here as auricle as well. So atrium receives, ventricle pumps out, atrium receives. So you can see from the pulmonary vein, blood goes into the left atrium. Now in the left atrium, blood goes into the left ventricle. Now, for blood to go into the left ventricle, there's a passage that they go through. This passage here is a valve we mentioned before, one of the valves we mentioned before. Now, this is the mitral valve. Now, look at the mitral valve. So the pressure from this left atrium is what pushes the mitral valve to open. So the pressure there will cause the mitral valve to open, allowing blood to go into the left ventricle. Now, at that point, the left ventricle will expand, or will expand. So when they expand, they suck in blood. When they shrink, they push out blood. So it will expand to receive the blood through the mitral valve. Now, the mitral valve, once the blood gets into the left atrium, it closes up. Reason, it prevents blood from flowing backward. So the blood in the left ventricle, when the left ventricle compresses, it pushes, instead of pushing it back into the left atrium, it pushes it into the aortic valve. We call it aortic valve. That is valve of the aorta. We call it aortic valve. So it pushes it. You can see the position of the valve. Now look at the position of the mitral valve as well. The mitral valve, you see the highest position. That's why it cannot be pushed from the other side. So you see it's like this. So blood pressure can only cause it to open this way. That's when blood pressure is coming from this side. But if the pressure is coming from this side, it remains closed. So that is why it's preventing blood from entering the left atrium. Okay. Now from the left ventricle, it pushes its way into the aorta. Then from the aorta, you can see it goes into the body. It goes into the body. That's why we have the systemic circulatory system. So it goes into the body. Now, for your information, aorta is regarded as the largest artery in the body. Aorta is regarded as the largest artery in the body. Okay, so from the aorta, it goes into the body. Now, when it finishes all the body function, once it's done with all the body function, the blood needs to come back to the heart. Remember, we said we talked about the double circulatory system, whereby blood passes through the heart twice. There is double circuit. Now we are done with the first circuit. We are going to the second one now. Okay, so from the body of the animal, the blood will journey back into the heart. Now, as it's coming back, blood enters the heart through two channels. We call that the vena cava. Now, one is called the superior vena cava, one is called the inferior vena cava. Superior is the one that collects the blood on the upper part of the body. As you can see it here, look at the superior, the one at the upper part. Now, so it's one in charge of the blood within the upper part of the body, whilst inferior vena cava is the one in charge of the blood on the lower part of the body. Now, mind you, in biology, anytime you hear the word superior and inferior, superior means the one at the top, inferior means the one below. It does not mean it has nothing to do with the quality or the quality of anything. It's just the position. That's what inferior and superior is in biology, position. Okay, so vena cava, blood comes in back into the heart through the vena cava. Now, this vena cava, for your information, is regarded as the largest vein in the body. Vena cava is the largest vein in the body. Please take note of that. Largest vein in the body. Now you can see both of them will come into the right atrium. Remember, atrium receives. So both of them, all of them will come into the right atrium. Same thing that happens in the left atrium will happen again. It will push the blood again into the right ventricle. So once it gets to the right ventricle, from there the right ventricle, the valve will close. Now this valve here is called the tricuspid valve. Please take note of that valve as well. There are 4 valves you need to take note of here. We've mentioned the mitral valve, we've mentioned the aortic valve. Now we are mentioning the tricuspid valve. Now this is tricuspid valve. I will tell you about how they got the name. Okay, now from the right ventricle, the blood goes into the pulmonary artery. Now this pulmonary artery is being guarded by another valve called the pulmonary valve of the pulmonary arteries, pulmonary valve. So it goes into the pulmonary valve, pulmonary artery to the pulmonary valve, and then from there it gets back to the lungs. Now you can see there are 2 channels here. One went this way, the other one came this way. So this one goes to the left, this one goes to the right lung. So that's how that happens. Okay, so it gets, remember, the blood being transported here is carrying carbon dioxide. So once it gets to the lungs, the carbon dioxide will be liberated, and then the oxygen will get attached again, and they will continue the cycle again. So that's why it's called circulation. Is keep going in cycle. Okay, now before we move on to the next, I want you to also take note of this structure here. Now if you look at the left ventricle, look, I can see the wall here. The wall here is thick compared to the right ventricle. The wall of the left ventricle is thicker than the right ventricle. Now that wall is made up of muscles. That's the cardiac muscle we talked about. So okay, so it's made up of muscles and it's thicker than the left ventricle. Now this is because right ventricle is where the highest amount of pressure is being exerted. Right ventricle is where left ventricle is where the highest amount of force is being exerted. So reason is because the heart will need enough force to push blood from the aorta to the whole body. Remember, the whole body is complex, so blood has to get to the whole body. So that is why more pressure is needed when it's being pushed the whole body. Okay, so but when it's coming back, remember, right ventricle is just pushing into the lungs, so it's close by, so it doesn't require as much of pressure as left ventricle. Okay, so take note of the wall. That's the thickness. That's what brings about the thickness. And then at the center here is the septum. They didn't label it, but it's called the septum. You know, children, they always talk about children used to have hole in their hearts. Used to have hole in their hearts. So that is what they meant by hole. So as a child grows, it's supposed to cover up, but in some cases it will not cover up, so the child will have to go for an operation in order to get it to cover. Okay, so but that's by the way. Okay, so I believe you understood everything. So I'm going to run a quick recap before I move on. Now blood from the lungs carrying oxygen will come into the heart through the pulmonary vein. Now from the pulmonary vein, it gets into the left atrium. Now the left atrium will contract and push it into the left ventricle. Remember, when the left atrium is contracting, the left ventricle is relaxing. Contraction will cause them to push. Relaxing will cause them to absorb. Okay, so when they are receiving, they relax to receive. When they are pushing, they will contract to push. Okay, so left ventricle will contract and then force the blood to move into the left atrium will contract and then force the blood to move into the left ventricle that is relaxed. Now when the left ventricle is full, the left ventricle will contract as well and then push the blood into the aorta through the aortic valve. From the aorta, it goes into the body. Now when it's done with the body function, it comes back again through the vena cava, through the inferior and superior vena cava. Okay, so once as it's coming in, the right ventricle, right atrium are the same way. The right atrium will relax to absorb the blood. Then after that, the right atrium contracts to push the blood into the right ventricle. From the right ventricle, as the right ventricle contracts, it pushes the blood into the pulmonary artery. Then from the pulmonary artery, it goes out back to the lungs, where it's not going to release the oxygen that is carrying and then pick up release the carbon dioxide is carrying and then pick up oxygen. So that is how the heart works. Okay, so this is another diagram. So this one is numbered. You can see now they decided to start from here. From the right atrium. So that atrium starts first. So it receives the oxygenated blood from the body. Then it comes in. Then it moves to the right ventricle. That is second. Pumps the oxygenated blood to the lungs. So it pumps it into the pulmonary artery into the lungs. Then after that, it comes to number 3. From the lungs again, it comes back again into the heart through the left atrium. Now the left atrium receives oxygenated blood from the lungs. And then from there, it goes into the left ventricle. Now the left ventricle will now pump it through the aorta into the body. So this is same thing I explained in the other previous parts. Okay, so look at this. So this is the valve. Is God not wonderful? See the valve. You can see the way it works. You can see the way it's opening and closing. Remember, I said when the chamber contracts. When the chamber contracts, it pushes the blood into the next chamber or into the next place where they're going to. But when they relax, they absorb blood. So when they contract, they push out. When they relax, they absorb. Now look at the 4 valves I mentioned before. The tricuspid valve. Now the word tricuspid. Now the word tri there is spelled to 3. The word cuspid there is spelled to cup-like. Cup. Okay. Now we'll use the word leaf-like structure. You can see this tricuspid. You can see 1, 2, 3. 3 structure here, leaf-like structure. You can see the bicuspid, you have 1, 2 structure. This is another, that means aortic valve is also a tricuspid valve. Aortic valve is also a tricuspid valve. The reason why you not call it tricuspid valve in the exam is because there are 3. You can see this one as well. This one is tricuspid valve as well. Now there are 3, so you don't call them tricuspid valve. Rather, you call them the right name that differentiates them. So pulmonary valve, aortic valve, and then tricuspid valve. Okay, so remember that. We know it's tricuspid. Another textbook will call them semilunar valve. That is lunar shape, so semilunar valve. Some call it atrioventricular valve. Now that means they're trying to combine the artery and the ventricle. They call it atrioventricular valve. Okay, so anyone is okay. All right, here I'll give you a few seconds to try and label this by yourself. Don't pause the video. You can pause the video and try and label this by yourself. Pause the video and try and label it. So I'll give you 1 minute. 1 minute. Just pause the video and try and label each of the components here. Then after that, we'll come back again and we'll try and see if we're right or if we're wrong. If you're right, congratulations. If you're wrong, you do your correction. All right, so see you in 1 minute.